Ladies and gentlemen, warmly welcome to the Swedish segment of the Singapore Fintech Festival, or as it is now, the World Fintech Festival, because this event has grown over not so many years to become the world's largest fintech event. And now during the COVID times when we can't meet up in person, it is a huge global online event. And I'm very proud that we from the Swedish side are able to field such a diverse and talented group of panelists under the different panels. I shan't keep you too long from that panel, but just wanted to make a couple of points on Sweden, Singapore, and fintech. First of all, we have been part of the Singapore Fintech Festival from the beginning in 2016, when our Minister for Financial Markets, Per Bolund, was a guest of the festival. And we have developed, this year, of course, Findec is hosting this event, but all the Swedish actors have developed, I think, a great friendship and cooperation with the Singaporean side, and especially with Swapnendo Mohanty and his team at MAS. Normally, we would end the week with the Swedish companies with a reception at my residence, and I'm sad to say we can't do that this year, but I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible in Singapore as soon as it is indeed possible. I want to say also that one thing that has come out of these last few years of cooperation is that it's been pleasing to see that so many Swedish fintech actors have actually established themselves and set up here in Singapore. And of course, you will hear from some of them during the course of this program, but I should mention probably Bima, Lendela, Midigram, Collectius. Those are some of the names that we see here in Singapore. And so I'm very happy that also the Nordic Innovation House, which is here, has been able to act as a soft landing spot for tech startups coming out here. Stockholm, you've just listened to Anna König Järmyr talk about Stockholm as a fintech hub. And of course, Stockholm, in one way of measuring it, is the third largest fintech hub in Europe, which is quite impressive. But it's also testimony to the sophistication and experience of the fintech ecosystem that we have in Sweden. And I want to make a broader point than Stockholm, which is that Sweden as a country has many factors going for it that makes it, not a coincidence that we are at the heart of European fintech. We are early adopters of technology, both when it comes to digitalization and having a mobile society, a technologically advanced society. We rank very highly. We have a world-class research and science ecosystem. I think that's quite important. And I would also say that since we were also early in the last huge technology boom, we have a lot of experience, both from successes and from failures, that have contributed, I think, to the success of mentoring some of the talents today. And we have financial capital, venture capital, angels, and experts who have been supporting this ecosystem. And of course, I would say from the government point of view, it's also something that we very much encourage. I just read, actually, before coming on this panel on Twitter, I think that a Reuters article specifically on European technology startups, stating that 41 billion has actually gone into investment into European technology startups in 2020, which is a big bounce back from COVID. And it shows the leadership that the potential that Europe has. And we should all note that a few of the very major investments that were made were, of course, in Swedish technology companies like Spotify and Klarna. And also, one thing that has characterized the development of the fintech scene in Sweden has been our ability to collaborate. If you go back and you look at the development of Bank ID and Swish and other platforms, at the heart of that you find a willingness by some of the largest actors for example, the banks, sitting down to solve problems together. And that collaborative environment, I think, has been very important. And it continues to be so also when we enter into the realms of the next sort of stage of fintech, and not least with cybersecurity and blockchain technologies and so on. And on that final point of being a collaborative environment, I would also like to say that I'm very, very proud as Swedish ambassador that we're doing this Swedish segment as part of a broader Nordic program, because to a great extent, the Nordics and even maybe the Nordic-Baltic region, I would say, in terms of fintech and also in the broader technological sense, is in many respects, a single ecosystem. And so we're glad to be able to showcase that at the Singapore Fintech Festival as well. And here in Singapore, the Nordic Innovation House is one of the nodes that keep this collaboration together. And Singapore, like we have talked about Stockholm and Sweden being a fintech hub, of course, one of the main reasons that the Singapore Fintech Festival is such a success is that Singapore itself, not only is it a leading financial center, but it's also very much a regional hub for the exciting region and the exciting markets of Southeast Asia. And that is the perfect segue to hand over to Markus Kuusinen from Business Sweden, who will talk a little bit about the ASEAN markets. But before we listen to him, I think we will go back briefly to the Stockholm studio. But the Swedish Embassy in Singapore and myself, we are very, very proud to be associated with the festival and the Swedish top-level program. Thank you very much for attending.
For that, Niklas, and by that we're going to move directly to a studio in Singapore with Markus Kuusinen from Business Sweden and his panel. So go ahead, Markus.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Singapore. I think today we have a very exciting panel in front of us where you will have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about how it is to operate as a fintech in the region. My name is Markus Kuusinen, and I work as a product manager at Business Sweden here in Singapore, where one of my core focuses has been to support Swedish fintech companies to expand into the region. Of course, this year it's a little bit different, as we know by now, but during the last 3 years, we have approximately had 30 different Swedish fintech companies that have been participating in the Singapore Fintech Festival. And I'm very excited to have some companies that has established themselves through that, visiting the Singapore Fintech Festival, but we also have examples in the panel today that have been established for quite some time. So in the panel today, we have to my left, we have Johan Egnell, which is head of Asia for Mitigram, which is a platform for funding and hedging risk of trade. They have been in the region for quite some time, but decided this year to set up their own company, and Johan moved down to Singapore, and they focus mainly on larger MNCs and also on trading houses, etc. To the left of Johan, we have Gustav Agartsson, which is the CEO of Bima, and also the founder of it in 2010. It's one of the global leading insurance company for emerging markets and have had to date approximately 35 million customers that have reached, and also raised a little bit more than $100 million as well. In the region, they focus mainly on the emerging markets, so that doesn't include Singapore, but it includes markets like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Philippines, and Cambodia. And Gustav moved to Singapore this year from Europe. And to the left of Gustav, we have Nima Karimi, which is the CEO of Lendela, which is a platform that supports retail customers in finding the best personal loans. They established the company here in Singapore in 2018 and are solely focused on this region. So today they have operations in Singapore and in Hong Kong. So by that introduction, I think let's get going with the panel. So I think as a start, I would like to understand you all are here for a little bit different reasons. You focus on a little bit different markets, etc. So it would just be interesting for us to understand first, like why did you form the the first point decided to focus on this region as well. So maybe we can start with you, Johan. So why are Mittelgram focusing on Southeast Asia?
Thank you, Marcus. For us, the choice was quite simple. We managed to onboard a few large commodity traders to our platform, and Singapore is a center for commodity trading. So for us, knowing that our product had a nice product fit with the commodity traders, we knew that there was a potential for us here in Singapore. So that was the number one reason. The second reason was as well that this is a hub for not only traders but also for financial institutions. They are also our clients, but also for all of Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is a huge market. Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, all of that. We want to expand into these markets, and Singapore is it's the best place to travel from, and to these companies that are based in the companies from the neighboring countries. They also have offices here in Singapore where you can meet with them. So for us, Singapore was an easy choice for us.
Yeah, and for Bima, of course, like your main target is not Singapore as where you're selling your products and solutions, but you're still based here, right? But so how did it come you decided to focus on this region around it, not only Southeast Asia but also South Asia, and of course you have a lot of operations in Africa as well. But how come this region is interesting, and why are you here today as well?
So we developed our business model in Africa, and I think it worked pretty well there in Ghana, which was our first market. And we saw similarities between African and some of the Asian markets, and since the potential here is just enormous, right? With 200 million in Pakistan, and there are several other markets with more than 100 million people in each market. So we wanted to give it a try and see if we were right, if we could copy what we developed in Africa and do it here in Asia. And I think that has worked out quite well for us. The reason why we decided to have Singapore as a hub was that one of our early employees who was working with expansion in Singapore was, he was based here. So then we kind of built an office around him. But then we figured out that there are, you mentioned some of the advantages here. And it's a really nice hub. If you don't have COVID, it's also quite convenient to travel from here. So that's why, as you said, I moved here, but I'm based here now.
And for Lendela, Nima, you actually only have your operations in Singapore and in Hong Kong compared to many other like Swedish fintechs that maybe focus on Sweden and expand here. You decided to directly focus on Singapore first, and now also as well as Hong Kong. So how come you decided to focus on this region?
To be honest, that wasn't the case at first. We came here thinking, okay, this is the soft landing, and then we're going to enter Southeast Asia the same way to go into these emerging markets. But pretty soon we realized Singapore actually has a huge potential for our product. So we're in a B2C space. Of course, you start looking at the population, and you're like, oh, okay, this is, compare Indonesia with Singapore. But when we dug deeper and we looked at the GDP or the lending that's happening in this region, and also the maturity of the markets, like Singapore has a high digital maturity. There's KYC. There's a huge focus on fintech, obviously. There's digital lending licenses being given out the last years, virtual bank licenses now. So it was after a while we realized this is actually the right market to be at, and our model works better in a digital mature market than compared to an emerging market.
Yeah, and also if we continue a little bit to what are the success factors in this region? Of course, we know that they're based here, but it's like all the markets are very, very different in Southeast Asia. They are compared, like some are more well developed, some are less developed. The culture are different, etc. So it's a lot of differences in this region. But Nima, if we continue with you, like what do you see, like from your point of view, the markets you're focusing at? What are the main success factors, like as a Swedish fintech established itself here in this region?
So I represent the early stage startup here, a B2C version. And we launched in Malaysia and Thailand as well, so I can also include that knowledge. And the first thing is what you said. It's a huge difference between the markets. Don't come to Singapore and think once you've figured out Singapore, you can understand Malaysia, because you can't. It's very different. Just Singapore and Malaysia are supposed to be very close and similar, but they're not at all. Hong Kong is a completely different ballgame in terms of much closer to China, and the attitude of consumers is very different. The communication with consumers is very night and day compared to Singapore. So come in being ready for each market being different. And the way we tackled that is we hired local staff, hire locally, use local support. To some degree, obviously, we used Business Sweden, which I consider very good local support because you have the connection between Sweden and the local markets. So that was the key factor for us to not bring in a bunch of expats to run the business, to actually quickly go into the local community.
And what would you say for BIMA, of course, the markets you are mainly doing your businesses is quite complex markets as well, to some extent as well. So what would you say, like if you take some overall factors for why you have been successful in those markets, what would you say that has been?
Yeah, I think we also want to make sure that we hire people locally. So we have majority of the staff are in the market where we operate, and we have a small office here in Singapore. So one key success factor is to get the right team on the ground, of course, and then make sure that team has the flexibility to take the company's business model and the global learning, but adopt them to the local specific needs of that market. So that's been critical as well. And then I would say for us, we sell insurance and health services, and there's a need for those services across all markets. But one thing that makes a massive difference whether we're successful or not is what the payment landscape looks like. So are there payment platforms there? Do people use cash still, or do they have a wallet? If they have a wallet, yeah, then we can sell our service and use that as a payment channel. And that's been an absolute key success factor.
And how has it been for Mittegram, kind of so far? You feel like this has been kind of the success factors?
I mean, our company, we have always liked to operate in Singapore. It was mentioned before that there's a focus on fintech. I mean, we operate mainly in Europe and in Asia, and the sense we get and the sense I get since coming here is that these people that we try to target, which are treasurers or trade finance managers, they're quite open to new ideas, to innovation, and to try something new. And that is all we ask for in our case. We want them to try our platform because we're confident in our platform itself. So as long as they try, we're happy with that. And it is just people here. When I approach people, and when the people on the ground here approach people, they're happy to meet up and have a coffee. In Europe, at least, I get the feeling that you need to convince them a bit more. But here, people are open to new ideas, and that has certainly been a success factor for us. I don't think the need is much different here compared to Europe for our service. It's just that people are more open to adopt new technologies.
Yeah. Good. And then if we move on a little bit, I know, Nima, you have both worked within the fintech space in Europe and as well as here. What would you say, kind of, what are the main differences in the way as like running and being part of fintech here in this region compared to Europe, would you say?
I have to agree with the fact that there's much more openness for fintech here. I mean, this model, it's been done in the Nordics for many years. We need lenders and banks to work with. In the Nordics, it's still a struggle to get the banks on board. Here, I came here, immediately all the banks were ready to meet us and have conversations. Sure, it doesn't go fast. I mean, you still have to go through a sales process, but just that fact that the door was open to have a conversation was a huge difference that I noticed immediately. On top of that, there's this openness to understand. Singapore is trying. I mean, now I think they've caught up in many ways, but they've actively looked at Europe and US and seen the solutions there. Like Bank ID was mentioned, and we have SingPass now, and I think they've improved it with MyInfo. So this openness to look at other countries and steal the ideas and improve on it has been helpful. Because when we come in as a Swedish company, I feel like people listen to what we have to say. Like they understand that we've done a lot of things very well in Sweden, and they're open to our ideas.
Yeah. And for you have been here now 9 months. Like, what's the biggest surprises and differences compared to like doing what you did like sales back in Europe?
No, I think there's a lot more coffee drinking here. I mean, we drink a lot of coffee in Sweden as well during meetings, but here you meet up for coffee. In Sweden and in Europe, you often travel, you go to their office, you end up in a conference room and you have a presentation. But here, typically, the business relation starts with having a coffee. outside an office. And it's quite nice, it's quite informal. You discuss what the next step should be and the requirements for everyone. And so that's been quite nice. You sort of form I would say, a better and closer relationship with your counterparties here. I mean, you text them on WhatsApp. That's how you speak to each other here. And just that is quite a big difference. You see someone with their kids on the picture, and you have something to talk about. So I think that mentality of meeting people has been quite a surprise for me.
Yeah. So if we move over to you, Gustav, you mentioned a little bit about talent as well, right? And you have quite a lot of people employed in the region. How have you, has it been, so two questions, has it been kind of easy to find the right talent, and how do you feel like as a Swedish founded fintech, is like a strong brand to enter into those markets, and is it attractive kind of to work for a Swedish fintech company?
Yeah, I think starting with the second question first. Yeah, I think so. I think Sweden has a strong brand. I mean, companies like H&M, IKEA help, and then I think now more recently also with Spotify, that really helped. I also kind of had meetings with people that refer to Investor and the Wallenberg family, and I had a very positive experience from there. So I think, yeah, Sweden is a strong brand. Somehow a country associated with quality. So yeah, that helps. When it comes to recruitment and finding building the right team, I think from my experience, usually when it works out well, you have a bit of luck in the beginning. So you start with one very strong person who has a good network and attract other good persons, and then you can build from that. But then also more generally here in Singapore, I think one advantage of having a hub in Singapore is that people that are prepared to move either from Europe or the US, or if they're already here in the region, they are usually okay to move to Singapore, right? So some people, they want to be where they are, but if they're okay to move, they usually have a list. These are the countries we can consider, and Singapore is usually on that list, and that helps a lot as well.
Yeah. And as to be for Lindell, you have hired quite a lot of people in the region, in different markets in Southeast Asia, etc. How has that been for you to find and attract talent for your business?
I mean, to some degree, it's been a struggle in the early days, and still to some degree. I think, for example, Singapore, at least 3 years ago when I came here, working for a startup is not the hottest thing you can do here. Generally for a Singaporean, I'm generalizing here, it's more about going maybe to a big bank or a big brand. While I feel like in Stockholm, that's working for a startup is the coolest thing you can do. And then us being totally unknown doesn't help. Now I feel like we've kind of taken a bit, thanks to hiring really good local people and them being able to kind of expand the network. That's been really helpful. But that was a struggle in the early days. But there are ways to solve that. We used really good recruiters, and they've been helped us in the beginning and still are helping us. So there's ways around it. But this startup mentality, I've had sometimes struggle finding that entrepreneurial mentality in hiring in some markets, mainly Malaysia and Thailand, to be honest.
And how do you feel like I would say that I've been here a little bit more than 3 years. I feel like it's changing quite a lot, like the perception of the working for a startup, etc.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why I said 3 years ago, I feel it was different than now. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if we move on, Gustav, if you a Swedish fintech company would like to move down here, there's a lot of different fintech areas, right? Everything from payment, insurance that you work with, the loans, etc. Have you seen there any specific areas when you've been traveling around in the region that could be of more interesting from Swedish fintechs that they maybe should focus on this region?
Yeah, I think there's obviously tremendous potential thanks to all the people, and also that still the penetration of these services still quite low. But what I do believe is important before taking the decision to move to the region, and especially if you're going from Europe and you're targeting markets like Indonesia or Philippines, for example, which again are massive opportunities and really, really attractive. But these markets are obviously very different from European markets. You need to then understand in detail what it is that enables your business model to work and whether the circumstances are right in these markets. And if I look back at, for example, over the last years with Bima, we had during, I think it was 2014, we expanded to 7 new countries. And that was too much. We didn't do our research well enough. We didn't enter into the right commercial agreements, and then we had to exit some of those markets. So, yeah, I think before, yes, I guess because they have something that works in one part of the world and in one country, you know, you need to do the research before going to other markets. Or you can do like we did, but then you have to be prepared to exit.
Yeah, and it's also a little bit what you've been through in Lendela, right? Focus on a little bit the different markets, enter new ones, maybe stop focusing on other markets. So how has kind of that process been for you? And would you have done anything different compared, like where you, of course you would have maybe done something different where you are today, but is it something you could have done different in that journey?
For sure. And to answer that question, your previous question also, you come here, I think B2C that I can speak about, I can't talk much about B2B, but if you come with it, whatever Swedish product you have or Nordic product, I think it's more suitable for maybe Singapore, maybe Hong Kong, the more mature markets, than bringing it directly to Indonesia. I think that would probably, just generalizing, probably not be a good idea. For me, I eventually realized there's like 3 tiers of markets for me. Tier 1 is like Singapore, Hong Kong, maybe eventually like South Korea, Taiwan, Australia, highly digitally mature markets, rule of law, KYC in place, e-identity coming. That is a good market for us, good competition between the lenders, of course, that's important. And then tier 2 was Malaysia, Thailand, maybe a few more now, that still maybe aren't like a perfect match for us. And then tier 3 would be like Indonesia, Vietnam, which is like, that's not a good match for our model yet.
And also I think you touched on Bima a little bit now as well, like, because today you focus on Singapore and Hong Kong, and I think a lot of people in Sweden, if they look at kind of where should I set up my fintech in Asia if I would like to expand there, then a lot of people I think would consider Singapore, Hong Kong, because they're considered like the financial hubs. Like how come like did you decided to set up here, like and not Hong Kong? Is that a coincidence, or like would you change anything there? And like and what do you see as the pros or cons in being in the different markets or those 2 markets?
Unfortunately now, maybe it's kind of a no-brainer slowly with the developments in Hong Kong. I wouldn't want to move my team to Hong Kong right now. Singapore is given, and for even before that, Singapore was given. For our case, we had a local VC investing in us, so our seed funder was here, and it was a no-brainer to move in here with them because we needed their support in the early days as well, and still do. But for me now, what's going on in Hong Kong, I think definitely that's another argument to stay in Singapore.
Yeah. And for you, Gustav, like you decided to move down last year, right? You were based in Europe before. So what is a little bit the reason that you're based outside of Singapore now as the CEO of Bima?
Yeah, I mean the whole idea was to be able to kind of do trips to countries like Indonesia and Philippines, Malaysia. So now with COVID, obviously all that changed, but still, hopefully, can go back to travel again. And then, I mean, it's a massive advantage to be closer to where our customers are and understand these markets, and also be able to, I mean, I can visit a market a week without traveling all the time. If I was doing that from Europe, I spent the majority of my life on a plane. And also to, in terms of where you have the hub, having a hub in Europe and work with Africa and Asia. Again, the people that you attract, the people you hire will not have that much experience from these markets. Whereas here in Singapore, I mean, many people have been working in this region, so even if they've been living in Singapore, they know the neighboring markets really well.
Yeah. And for you, Johan, like you moved on 9 months ago. You just established a company, went through all that process. So how was that process to set up a company in Singapore?
No, I would say, of course, there was some paperwork to be done, but setting up the company was definitely quite smooth, I would say. There was some questions marked about we had to, on the beneficial owners, we had to sort out from our investors. They wanted, at some point, they claimed they wanted to know all the names of our beneficial owners, and one of our owner has 23,000 shareholders, so that would have been tough. But we managed to not look at that. But otherwise, and the EP process was also very good to get the visa to work here. I've only applied for student visas before, but I can't think of many other countries that have a sort of a simpler setup of setting up a business and moving down and getting an office and all of that. It was, we made the decision quite late in 2019, in December more or less, that it's time for us to set up something properly in Singapore. And by February, we had the company set up. By March, I was here, and in April, I had the EP. So all in all, 4 months.
Yeah, it's typically what we've seen. Like, it's a very smooth journey to incorporate and hiring people as well here in
yes, absolutely, yeah.
Good, and then Nima, you touched a little bit upon that as well. That you have raised money locally as well. Like one of the few Swedish founded companies that I know about that have actually raised money here. But I get a lot of requests from Swedish startups that would like to look into raising money. So you have some how has that journey been for you to raise money here? And there is some advice for other Swedish startups. What should they know about before they start looking into raising money here?
Yeah, we have raised locally so far. And what are the advice? Make sure you have a good business model and a good pitch. Call me and I'll give you advice one-on-one. But I think it was very helpful to have a local VC as step one. I think without Cocoon Capital, who's our VC, it would have been so much harder to get where we are now. So if I would have come here with maybe a few angel investors and try to figure this out, maybe it would have worked out, but it was so much better to have someone that understands the market, has a huge network, and has done the mistakes, can introduce us. You have to do all this stuff, corporate secretary, opening bank accounts. You mentioned opening a company is easy, but opening bank account was not as easy. No. And it's getting harder every time I have to deal with the banks. So that I think is very good. Try to find a local investor for sure, because they can help you along the way, the early days.
Good. And then we move over to you, Gustav. We touched upon that a little bit initially, right? But you're in kind of operation in quite many markets around the region. So, if we could explain a little bit, what are the differences between all those markets, and what are the different kind of maybe regulatory challenges you might have faced in those markets as well?
Yeah. No, as you say, they are different. The markets are very different. If I compare, for example, Bangladesh with Malaysia, they're looking at income levels, for example. They're very different. Then, as you said, the regulation differs across all markets. And one of the challenges for us is that we're trying to do something that is fairly new, of selling insurance and also bundled with telemedicine services. And the framework, the regulatory framework, is not there. So that's actually it's a similar situation across all markets, but that also means that we need to take an approach where we work together with each individual regulator to kind of develop the framework for that, or get them to agree to do a pilot. So again, we have to localize the approach everywhere. And then coming back to the point I mentioned earlier, what the payment landscape looks like, that has a massive difference for us. And also looking back at some of the markets that we had to exit, it was because the payment landscape wasn't mature enough. But that's growing rapidly right now here in the region.
Yeah, and as well, in your case as well, right? Because if you look at the bank penetration, the number of people having a bank account in the markets you are in right now it's relatively low, right? But on the other hand, you have most people have a mobile phone, right? And even a smartphone as well. So that's a little bit kind of the ways you have worked, right? In try to reach the customers in those markets, right?
No, you're right. And the smartphone penetration is growing very rapidly. And I think if you look at the emerging markets in Asia, the smartphone penetration is now most of 60%. But also on the payment side, even if people don't have traditional bank accounts, you have the kind of e-wallet providers that have, and they're backed by Alibaba, Tencent, etc. So they're well funded and they're growing rapidly. So also the share of the population that have access to some form of e-wallet, that's also changing rapidly right now.
Yeah. And even back to like the regulatory area as well, like you've been in multiple markets as well in the region. Like how is working with like personal loans? Has there been that challenge like from a regulatory perspective, like the model that you have?
In a way, no, because we are, from a regulatory perspective, we're not a lender, we're not a P2B lender, we're not in the space, the regulated space. But there are some areas that I've been actually frustrated. Like, for example, credit scoring. We're as a third party, we're not allowed to obtain credit reports directly. We have to go through directly from the customer or something. We can't just connect to them like the way we can do in Sweden or in the Nordic countries. There are some regulations around lending. Like in Singapore, you have to actually go down to the branch to sign the loan, which is, I mean, it should be digital by now, maybe. Stuff like that, that's been a little bit frustrating. But other than that, the great news is that we are not regulated, and we are able to do our business model without any hindrance in that area.
Perfect. And then we do one last question from all of you. It will be a little bit like interesting what's kind of your focus going forward. Like if we look a little bit into the future, kind of what will be the focus of your different companies in the region. So maybe we can start with you, Johan.
I know the focus for us was a sort of ride. We had quite a good wave. COVID-19 was good for us in terms of digitization wave, and we want to continue on that wave and scale up in the region. So for us, it's about hiring and onboarding more of these large MNCs and traders. That's very much a number one focus on. Establish ourselves among these names that as a household name really in the trade finance space.
That's for Bima.
I think we have a fairly proven business model in a couple of African markets and also in South Asia, but not yet in Southeast Asia. So we still have a lot more to do in Malaysia and Indonesia and Philippines to create a profitable business. So that's our focus right now, and those markets bring enormous opportunities. So quite excited about that.
Do you see any like entering any of the other markets that you're not like in today? Like,
yeah, I mean, of course, markets like India and Vietnam are extremely interesting and enormous opportunities. But it's that balance between going after too much and versus being focused on where we are. And again, we haven't cracked Indonesia, Malaysia, or Philippines yet. That's our focus now.
Yeah.
But of course, at some point, yeah, maybe.
All right. And for Lendela, what's the focus now going forward?
So, I mean, we just closed our fundraising round, so I've been like starving the team for all of 2020, waiting for this money to come to the bank account, which it did last week. So now it's all about rapid growth. I want to continue focusing on Singapore and Hong Kong. I see a tremendous potential for our model in these two markets, but I want to enter at least one or two more markets by end of next year. God willing, we can travel and all that.
Yeah.
I think nowadays maybe you can do it virtually anyway. So.
Yeah. All right. But then thanks to all of you for listening in to the panel. Hope you learn a little bit new stuff about Singapore and the region as a whole, how it is to do business as a fintech. So have a continuous fun day here in Stockholm. I know the program looks really great. So thanks a lot from us here in Singapore.